She was just the janitor, pushing her wheelchair along the sterile hospital corridor when they started laughing at the tattoo on her forearm. It was a simple cobra, coiled tightly with eyes that seemed to glow in ink. But to them, it was nothing more than a weird design. What kind of freak has a snake tattoo like that? One guy snickered loud enough for half the ward to hear. They had no idea that tattoo marked her as Ember 2, a call sign earned through fire and blood 5 years ago during Operation Silent Viper in the mountains of Afghanistan. They had no idea who she really was. Every morning for the last 3 years, 36-year-old Master Chief Sarah Raven Mitchell had maneuvered her wheelchair through the endless halls of Greenfield Medical Center, mopping floors without complaint, cleaning up after strangers who never once noticed the silent warrior among them. Long dark hair pulled back in a tight braid, her faded navy jacket draped over her lap bore the worn Trident insignia, something no one ever saw because she covered it with a hospital gown or the janitor's rag. Her prosthetic legs, hidden beneath loose black pants, were a secret testament to a nightmare-turned badge of honor. She was quiet, impeccably composed, and utterly invisible until that morning when everything changed. The usual whispers started first, her limp, the wheelchair, the silence she kept. But this time, a trio of hospital staff from the cafeteria had decided to push the humiliation further. "Why don't you race those wheels, Grandma?" one jeered. "Or are you too slow for even a crawl?" The others laughed, the sound brash and unrelenting in the usually calm hallway. She didn't flinch, she didn't speak. Her head lowered, eyes fixed on the floor, steady hands gripping the side of her chair. This was routine, the kind of routine that wears down a person or steals their spine. And Sarah, trained in the art of endurance and control, leaned into the silence like a shield as the insults grew louder and the mocking more brazen. It was just another day until one of them noticed the tattoo. The man who had dared push her wheelchair to the side, laughing as if he owned the hall, didn't expect what came next. As he shoved a mop bucket too close, the coffee from a nurse's cart spilled hot across her lap. The surge of heat drew a sharp inhale from the room, but Sarah remained unmoved, her eyes steady and unyielding. He leaned in close, trapping her in his jeering breath. "What are you gonna do? Roll away like a fragile little princess?" The words hung heavy until a sudden quiet fell like a shockwave. From the corner of the hallway, a young uniformed soldier watching from the break room stepped forward. His face went pale when he saw the trident patch partially visible beneath her torn jacket. The tattoo on her arm was no ordinary ink, but the mark of SEAL Team 6, the infamous Devil's Brigade. He knew exactly what that coiled cobra meant. His voice was low but firm as he spoke urgently into his radio. Within minutes, the atmosphere changed. 8 black SUVs pulled up to the hospital entrance before you could blink. Then 12 men in tactical gear filed silently through the sliding doors, weapons holstered but eyes sharp as hawks, Navy SEALs, unshaven and battle-worn, their presence undeniable. The leader, a tall man whose steely gaze mirrored the walls of combat zones he'd survived, approached the swelling crowd with an unspoken command. They surrounded her table with an electric tension. No words were necessary. The air shifted and charged as every SEAL in the room stood at once, the hospital staff and mocking onlookers shrinking back in awe and uncertainty. It was then that the full story unfolded, like the pages of a classified dossier in a war room. She was Master Chief Sarah Mitchell, known as Raven in the field, a sniper credited with saving 23 soldiers during a mission 5 years earlier. They told how, at 300 yards distance, she jumped on a grenade not to save herself but to buy her team those priceless 10 seconds. Her legs were lost in the blast, but the lives she saved carried her legend. The tattoo was a reminder not only of the unit but of her call duty, Ember 2, the fire she carried within despite her injuries. The young soldier who called for backup saluted her first, breaking all protocol, his voice cracking with respect. "I've trained under her," he admitted. "She saved my life and the lives of every member of my platoon." The hospital's laughter turned to silence, the men who mocked lowering their heads. The hospital director, pale and suddenly aware of the mistake, stepped forward to apologize amid an audience that had now transformed from judgmental to reverent. 12 Navy SEALs encircled her wheelchair, protectors arriving not for conflict but for justice. But the story wasn't just about respect earned in the moment. It was about the harsh reality of invisibility and how society often overlooks the wounded who carry hidden battles. Sarah's resilience redefined strength. The adversaries who had dared mock her disability were now rendered powerless by the weight of truth. The man who spilled coffee too close had his jaw set tight under the glower of the lead SEAL. "You will apologize to Master Chief Raven," the commander said quietly, unwavering, "and you will mean it." The threat lingered like a storm warning. "This place is under our protection now." The hospital, once just a battleground for petty cruelty, transformed into a sanctuary where justice walked wheels first. Many didn't know how to act, not sure if they were witnessing a reunion or a reckoning. The woman who had quietly cleaned up after strangers had shattered the illusion of invisibility. She was no janitor to be mocked, no victim to be ignored. She was a warrior who carried scars, both visible and unseen, who demanded yet quietly commanded respect through her presence alone. Even the high-ranking officers in the hospital who had doubted her before were forced to reckon with the fact that she was a master strategist, a tactician who had led teams in some of the most dangerous combat zones on Earth. Her story was already becoming legend among those inside those walls and those tuning in far beyond. In the coming moments, the truth would spread like wildfire. The SEALs weren't here for showmanship or bravado. Their arrival was a demonstration of loyalty, of brotherhood, and of a promise that no dishonor would be tolerated, especially toward a hero in a wheelchair. The tension that once gripped the hallway evaporated, replaced by an unmistakable sense of righting a long-standing injustice. But Sarah herself remained calm, almost detached, as if the recognition was simply another mission completed. She didn't boast, didn't demand applause. Her eyes held a flicker of tired pride and something deeper, a hardened humility only years of combat and survival can forge. She knew the battle was not just against external enemies, but against the disbelief and disrespect that shadowed disabled veterans every day. And she was ready to face that too, if it meant standing for every soldier who had ever been underestimated. The hospital staff slowly began to change their tone, the mockery replaced by whispered apologies and hesitant gratitude. The man who had spilled the coffee, now pallid and shrinking under the gaze of the CLS, muttered an apology she barely registered. Sarah's voice, when it came, was steady but cold. "You mocked a ghost," she said softly, "and she let you live to regret it." Her words sent a chill down the corridor, marking the turning point. As she wheeled herself towards the exit, flanked by silent protectors, the crowd parted like water. The janitor was gone. In her place rolled a legend, a reminder that heroism doesn't always wear a uniform in the traditional sense. Sometimes, it wears scars, wheels, and a tattoo that tells an unspoken story. And those who doubted, they knew that from now on, respect wasn't optional, it was demanded and enforced. The crowd held its breath as the lead SEAL stepped forward, his voice steady but carrying the weight of unquestionable authority. "You will apologize to Master Chief Raven," he said, his eyes locking onto the man who had spilled the coffee and unleashed the jeers. The man's bravado evaporated instantly, swallowed by the cold fire in the Navy sniper's gaze. "You mocked a ghost," Sarah finally spoke, calm but with a steel edge that cut through the lingering tension, "and she let you live to regret it." No one dared interrupt. The man, his cheeks burning red, stumbled through his apology, voice barely above a whisper, as the rest of the ward watched in stunned silence. This wasn't just a reprimand, it was a reckoning. Sarah's hands rested calmly on the rims of her wheelchair, the slight tremor of years fading into a hardened resolve that rattled the fragile bravado of the room. The SEALs behind her formed a protective semicircle, silent sentinels who had seen worse, but had never witnessed this kind of justice handed down in a hospital hallway. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were the shield for a fallen warrior who refused to be broken. The hospital director, caught between embarrassment and newfound respect, nodded solemnly, stepping in to assure that such behavior would never be tolerated again under his watch. "Master Chief Mitchell," he said, voice shaking but sincere, "we owe you more than an apology." But Sarah was already moving, wheeling herself slowly toward the exit. As she turned, the morning light caught the gleam of the prosthetics fashioned with meticulous care, a constant reminder of the mission that had cost her so much. The medical staff parted instinctively, a wave of reverence spreading like wildfire. No longer was she invisible. No longer was she just the janitor who had silently cleaned their floors. She was a living testament to sacrifice, courage, and unwavering loyalty. Outside, the black SUVs idled quietly, their doors open and engines ready. One of the younger CLS, barely older than 25 but hardened by years in combat, guided her toward the vehicles. Behind him, the rest of the team melted seamlessly back into the shadows of the city, their presence both a shield and a warning. The word would spread beyond these walls, across the networks, in military circles, and into the hearts of those who knew what it meant to fight and lose yet still stand. It was a story that demanded to be heard. As the vehicles pulled away, Sarah's eyes scanned the horizon, reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. She had spent years hiding in plain sight, bearing wounds unseen by the world and scars invisible without context. For years, she had masked the pain of loss beneath a humble facade, enduring the whispered doubts, the sideways glances, and the outright cruelty that came with being differently abled in a society that valued strength only when it fit narrow ideals. Today, that facade shattered. Her phone vibrated gently in her lap. She glanced down to see a message from a former commander, a simple line that meant more than words could say. Mission complete. Proud of you, Raven. The call sign was no longer just ink on her skin. It was a symbol of survival and leadership, of battles fought and deep bonds forged in fire. She allowed herself a small, rare smile before locking the screen. There was more to come, more work to be done, more barriers to break. Back inside, the hospital staff gathered quietly, talking in hushed tones about what had just happened. The cafeteria trio who had once mocked her were silenced, their faces marked by deep shame and a dawning realization of the grace they had violated. One nurse, who had initially turned a blind eye, approached the director, suggesting mandatory veteran awareness training. The director agreed immediately, recognizing that the shame of today was a turning point for the entire institution. From now on, every veteran walking through those hospital doors would be met with dignity and respect, not disdain. Meanwhile, word had reached the local news. Reporters swarmed the entrance, eager to share the story of the janitor who was, in truth, a decorated Navy SEAL. Interviews were arranged, carefully balancing Sarah's preference for privacy with a growing public demand to hear her voice. She spoke softly but firmly, recounting the mission during Operation Silent Viper in the rugged mountains of Afghanistan, where she had held a sniper position for 72 hours under enemy fire. She told how she had seen a grenade land near her team and made the split-second decision to shield her brothers with her own body, an act of selflessness that left her permanently wounded but saved 23 lives. Her prosthetic legs were not a symbol of disability but of resilience. The Cobra tattoo was not just ink but a mark of identity, a reminder of her allegiance to the Devil's Brigade, the elite unit that operated in the deadliest hotspots on Earth. The world heard her story not as pity, but as proof of valor and determination. The video of the moment when the SEALs arrived at the hospital went viral within hours, inspiring countless veterans and civilians alike to stand up against stigma and ignorance. Sarah's message was clear: honor all who serve, regardless of the scars they carry. She called for society to see past the wheelchair or prosthesis and recognize the people behind them, people who had chosen service over comfort, courage over fear. Every soldier deserves respect, she said, not just for what they did in the war, but for what they do when it's over, fighting every day to reclaim their life. As the news cycle continued, organizations that provided support to disabled veterans reached out offering partnerships. Sarah began to collaborate with groups committed to easing the transition for wounded warriors, lending her face and story to campaigns that emphasized empowerment and inclusion. Invitations to speak at military conferences and universities followed, her presence a reminder that disabilities do not define a person's value or strength. But even with accolades and attention, Sarah remained grounded. Her wheelchair was not a throne, but a tool, a means to keep moving forward. Behind her calm demeanor was the heart of a leader who never gave up on her team or herself. The same steady hands that once gripped a sniper rifle now held a mop, proof that every role mattered when the mission was survival and respect. The hospital, transformed by the day's events, installed a plaque near the entrance commemorating Master Chief Mitchell's service and sacrifice. It was a small gesture, but one that ensured no visitor or staff member would ever forget the warrior who had silently walked their halls. The staff now wore pins recognizing veterans, a quiet but powerful sign that empathy could be learned and respect earned. Months later, Sarah returned to Greenfield Medical Center, not as the janitor she'd been, but as a guest of honor for the hospital's new veteran support program. The hallways that once echoed with whispers of mockery rang with applause as she entered, greeted by faces that now carried understanding rather than judgment. Children in wheelchairs, soldiers with visible injuries, and families of veterans smiled at her, seeing in Sarah a reflection of their own struggles and strength. In that moment, she looked down at her cobra tattoo and traced the outline with her fingers, feeling the weight of the unit it represented and the countless lives tied to her decisions. She was no longer invisible. She was a beacon, a testament that no matter the wounds, no matter the odds, dignity and honor endure. The woman who had mopped floors and weathered insult had taken command of the narrative, rewriting how society saw wounded veterans forever. Her story became a rallying cry, reverberating far beyond Greenfield. Advocates used her example to push for better policies for disabled service members, better health care, and more comprehensive rehabilitation programs. Military units recognized the importance of supporting their own beyond the battlefield. The ripple effect of a single moment of courage and recognition grew into a tide of change. And somewhere in the quiet hours, long after the cameras had left, Sarah sat by a window overlooking the city, the sun casting shadows across her face. Her journey was far from over. But today, she had won more than respect. She had won a place in a world that too often overlooked heroes in wheels and scars. She had taken command, not just of a moment, but of a movement that promised no veteran would ever be invisible again.